Because I truly believe this. God's not going to bless the fake you.
No.
He wants the real you to be revealed, because somewhere in that real you is the breakthrough for the next man.
No matter what you've faced in your life, no matter what you've gone through, the regrets you may have for missed opportunities, those don't disqualify you. Rather, they uniquely qualify you. They uniquely qualify you because you can impart wisdom. You can impart lessons learned. You can speak into the lives of those following behind. We need you. The world needs you to step up and have vision again. Use your imagination. What can my life look like? Welcome to Next Third, Best Third. Hey, so welcome back to Next Third, Best Third. I'm David Fenwick, your host, and I'm joined again by my good friend, Ron Adkins. Ron, welcome.
Great to be here, David.
Yeah, this is always so much fun when he and I get together. Sometimes we just pontificate. We just go off on wherever we led, right?
That's right.
But Ron, you and I have been talking recently, and I wanted to dig into the danger of comparison, right?
Yeah.
I mean, comparison it can be diabolical, especially for men as we progress. When you're young, you're comparing who's faster, who's taller, who's stronger, this kind of thing. And then all of a sudden you're in this building stage where you're comparing your career with somebody else's and, your income stream, the house you buy, how pretty your wife is, your kids, and it gets real dangerous because as you get older, comparison, what I've found, can lead to things like regret, shame, kind of beating yourself up out of disillusionment and disappointment.
Definitely. I think there's a big element of pride that comes in when you begin to, if you are successful and you feel like you're at the top of the heap, and you tend to let pride come in and that, as we know, like the Bible says, that pride goes before a fall.
Right.
And God resists the proud.
Yeah.
He gives grace to the humble.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when we talk about comparison, we don't bring that aspect of humility into it, because there is such a thing as healthy competition.
Absolutely.
And that kind of comparison can be a good thing.
Right.
And it improves people's lives. That's what sports are all about,
Yeah.
But then in sports, just to continue in that analogy, there's a such thing as sportsmanship, right? And that's where the humility comes in.
That's good.
Right? Because you always shake hands at the end of the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And whoever won or lost, it's not that big a deal. It's just we competed and that's what happened. And there's no, looking down your nose at somebody else that didn't compare to you on the court.
Well,
but there is in life.
There is in life, and even when we're talking about just our own personal striving for excellence, excellence, especially in God's kingdom, that's a huge thing. But that striving for excellence or being the best Ron that you can be, the best David that you can be, that's really that should come from that place of humility.
I think so.
Right? So that it's like, I'm not trying to find my identity in my successes, but because of who I am, I want to live out the very best life I can. I mean, even part of Next Third, Best Third is this commitment to live with intentionality. So we're living a life of excellence as we age, right?
Right.
So when you look at, though, comparison, like there's that natural, almost needed or healthy comparison that's out there in the world and sports and things like that. But where I see the trouble, and I know for myself, it's when I look at somebody else, or I look at a standard maybe that I've set for myself, or this social standard, this icon that I'm trying to attain to, and I start to value myself on the scale of comparison. I'm not as good as.
Right.
I'm not
as
successful.
That's a big problem, because like in Romans 8, it talks about you're set free from the idea that you never measure up.
Yeah.
Right? You're supposed to be free of that idea.
Right.
Because in the kingdom, there's no results-oriented achievement.
Right.
Right? because God says you're the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus. You're free, and who the Son is set free is free indeed, right?
Right.
And that scripture we were talking about a minute ago from John chapter 8, verse 15, where it says he doesn't judge by outward appearances, right?
Yes.
And so for us, that's a big deal because that's all we do.
I know.
You know what I mean? We see something and we judge it by its outward appearances, and that's it.
That's right.
But in order to have the Father's perspective, we have to learn not to do that. We have to learn to have humility. We have to learn that God judges things by the heart and not the outward appearances.
Yeah.
And it's hard because everything in society tells us, you got to be number one or you're nothing. Like Ricky Bobby said, second place is just the first loser, right?
Right.
That's not true, though.
No, it's not. It's not.
And I think we judge ourselves by that standard instead of God's standard.
Well, talking, bringing scripture into it, there's in 1 Timothy 6, it says that righteousness with contentment, or godliness with contentment, really, is great gain. And that godliness really speaks to your position, your identity. Who I am is not what I do.
Yeah.
Who I am is not what I have created or what I have achieved.
Yes.
Right. And so
I think that's the key to the comparison problem, because like you said, we fold ourselves into that, and that becomes our identity as men.
Right.
I'm a excellent engineer. I'm an excellent carpenter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What we do folds into our identity, because when men talk, that's what what do you do for a living?
I know.
You know what I mean?
First thing, you meet somebody at a party or something.
Because that lets you know who they are in a way.
That's right.
And that's just ingrained in our society. But we have to realize, we're more than that.
Yeah. I remember when I was traveling in a corporate job, and I'd go to these conventions and I'd go to these meetings, and you'd get that kind of that strutting, what do you do? You're introducing yourself. And I would throw the guys off because I'd meet them, and right away I'd sit there and say, well, tell me about your family.
Yeah.
Are you married? Tell me about your kids. What do you value? And they're like looking at me because they want to tell me that they're the CEO of this company or they own this. And it would disarm men. But I've found that it also opened up men a lot of times because they all of a sudden they're like going, wait a minute, this guy's not trying to compare with me.
Yeah.
So that was powerful.
Because there always is that aspect in a group of men. There's, roosters sticking their chest out.
Yeah.
And, my grandfather used to call it a pissing contest.
Yeah.
I think that if we can ever get a true perspective at the way God sees us and begin to operate in that perspective, then we can come out of results-driven comparison.
That's so good, because that's
and
really
we can
what
see
happens.
ourselves in a way that we actually are, and not define ourselves by what we do.
That's right. We're not an accumulation of what we've accomplished and what we do. Right. Our identity is much more secure, which brings you back to that humility part. Right. Being humble and recognizing, wait a minute, this life is short. On my deathbed, I'm not going to be sitting there saying, oh, I wish I made more money. I'm not going to say, I wish I would have accomplished this or
exactly.
accomplished
Those
that.
things are going to pass away.
That's right. And so when we get ourselves into that place where we're outside of that position, that right position of our identity, then we get into this place that we're insecure, right? Which is where comparison comes in. Now I'm starting to value myself according to what I've accomplished or haven't. I start beating myself up. I start, getting shame and resentment and all these, and, just disappointment in myself. Mm-hmm. And that's a terrible place, because now the other part of that, 1 Timothy says, godliness with contentment is great gain.
Yeah,
that contentment is this.
It's a good word.
Yeah. And because there's sufficiency there.
Yeah.
And when I get discontent, it's because I'm out of that alignment of who I am, and I'm comparing myself, and now you're into this spiral of discontentment.
Yeah, well, see, there's something else involved there too when you talk about contentment, because I heard a man that I respect a lot. He said one time that he counseled a lot of men that's fallen into, temptation with sexual things, and like in the ministry and outside the ministry.
Sure.
And what he said blew me away. He said, none of it was a lust issue. It was always a fulfillment issue.
Yeah.
And contentment brings fulfillment.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're always striving and trying to one-up the next guy and there's never contentment, then there'll never be fulfillment.
No. So you find yourself in this striving in chase mode, right?
Yeah.
You're chasing all the time. You're striving. You feel driven, and you're being driven by what? You're being driven by discontentment, which is really fueled by this being out of alignment with your true identity.
Right.
I think
leads you down all these rabbit trails that you wouldn't normally go.
Yeah.
Like sexual issues or addiction issues or
because you're
whatever.
going to medicate the disappointment. You're going to medicate your pain. You see that all the time. And really what comparison is, it's really tied to fear. So much of it's tied to fear that,
you might see the real me.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. And nobody wants that.
Yeah.
Right?
What if you really see me?
Yeah.
But that's really where you find your biggest, we've been talking about this too, the vulnerability of opening up and seeing the real me.
Yeah.
Because I truly believe this, God's not going to bless the fake you.
No.
He wants the real you to be revealed, because somewhere in that real you is the breakthrough for the next man. Right? I think that's why he told Peter that when they were at the Last Supper, he said, Satan's desire to sift you as wheat, but I prayed for you that your faith doesn't fail.
Yeah.
And that when you come through this on the other side, you'll be able to reach back and strengthen your brothers.
Going back to that fear of seeing the real me, comparison then is kind of like fear realized or fear activated.
Yeah.
And you don't want anybody to really know who you are, and you're measuring yourself up against some other standard. But yet, if you're humble and you're content with who you are, then you do open yourself to a place of vulnerability where you disarm. Like I said, when I would go to these meetings and I'd talk to men instead about what they do, I'd try to go deep into who they are and find out about their lives. It disarmed them. And for the most part, there were some guys who just walked away, but for the most part, I found men were very, very willing at that point to have some meaningful conversation instead of just some.
Yeah, because it switched out of thumping your chest
Right.
and one-upping each other into something real.
Right.
Family and kids and things that you honestly care about.
Yeah.
That you would normally discuss with somebody you just met.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you're trying to posture and stake out your claim for whatever it is you got going on. You see what I'm saying?
No, I do. One of the things we talked about earlier before we came on is how comparison is leads us into judgment, right? It leads us into judgment. And I heard a good friend of ours share a message one time, and he was talking about how Satan is the accuser of the brothers, of the brethren, of the believers. And he said that word accuse is where we actually get our modern word category.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Categories, right?
I remember we was talking about that.
Yeah. And so what happens is when we are comparing, we're actually putting people into categories.
Yeah.
Because then once I can put you into a category, I can judge you.
Yep.
Right? But that judgment becomes accusation. And what's really diabolical about comparison is I'm putting myself into categories too.
That's right.
And so what am I doing? I'm accusing myself.
You're being judged by the same measure you judge others.
Yeah. And I'm accusing myself, right? And so that's why you're discontent.
Yeah.
And this thing spirals. I was talking to a guy this week about this very thing, and what we were talking about is so often when you get into a place where you're discontent, you're saying, well, I wish I had more money, or I wish I had a better job, or I wish I, was in better shape, or I wish this, or whatever it may be. And so you're kind of accusing yourself, but it could easily turn into where now you're accusing God. Why haven't you done this? I've been trusting you. I've been praying about this, and you're not coming through.
I fall into that trap all the time.
Right? And it's because we're out of alignment with our position, who we really are,
Yep.
and we're trying to be defined. And I told this guy this week, I said, we're crying out for God to give us breakthrough. We're trying, people are crying out for an answer, a breakthrough, a new job, whatever it may be. How can God bless that discontented, accusing guy, who's out of alignment with who he really is,
Mm-hmm. It happened from the beginning. Adam did it in the garden.
Yeah.
This woman you gave me.
That's right. The accusation. This woman you gave me.
Yeah.
Right. So, but that's how this thing gets diabolical.
It does. Yeah. And it feeds on itself.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most amazing pieces of advice I ever heard was from Dr. Jordan Peterson on one of his podcasts. He was talking about this, and he said that the only safe comparison is to who you were yesterday.
That's good.
Compare yourself. You want to be better than you were yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's the only safe comparison.
Yeah.
Because in that place you're going, like the Bible says, from glory to glory. You're progressing.
So what you're saying there is, yesterday you were content with yourself, right? You were content with yourself. You were in alignment with the real you. You're in the right position with God.
But I wake up tomorrow and I say, how can I be better than I was yesterday?
That's that drive towards excellence,
Yes.
or that call to excellence,
But it's not the type of comparison that says, I'm better than you, I got more than you, or
Right.
or you're worse than me, or
Yeah.
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was like the people, I know you know the story about the Gadarene demoniac, right? He was naked in the tombs, no chains could hold him. And one of the parts about that story that people miss a lot of times is that the people, once Jesus set this dude free, the people wanted him to leave,
Yeah.
right? Because
They wanted Jesus to leave.
they wanted Jesus to leave.
Right.
Because he took away, this is what God showed me in that place, he took away their excuse for not overcoming their own setbacks and failures.
Oh yeah, because this
Right?
guy.
They could always point to that guy and say, "Well, at least I'm not that bad.
I'm not as bad as so and so.
I'm not running around naked in the graveyard.
That's right.
So I'm all right."
Yeah.
There's that kind of comparison too.
Yeah.
It says, "At least I'm better than that dude, so I'm okay."
And that is where we can get caught in not striving for excellence in our lives, or reaching for excellence, is we can settle in and say, at least I'm not as bad as Ron,
Right.
At least I'm not as bad off as David,
Yeah.
Things could be worse, and so we get that we that's a false contentment there.
Yep. And I think what we were saying about the process of opening up and revealing who you really are, it also lets every other man in your community know they're not the worst.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like we're all stuck in this process of getting better and trying to overcome and
Right.
letting go of regrets and forgiving, and we're all doing that.
Yeah. That's so much what both you and I do in our own lives, is that I know for myself, trying to allow men to see, right? Allow men to see that they're first off, they're not alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they truly are valued, but also that there's not some utter failure, That's why being vulnerable and being transparent is so important.
It is.
And the very thing, one of the things we try to fight against in Next Third Best Third is that area of relationship decay, where men isolate, where men aren't real with each other. And as they get older, their spheres of influence get smaller and smaller, right? We've talked about that. But, you find these guys who they're sitting there at home, who knows, they're married, maybe their kids are still home, maybe they're not. And these guys are alone and they're isolated and they feel like, I'm the worst. I should be better than this.
That's right.
I can't believe I'm still struggling with this thing that I've been struggling with since I was a boy.
I think that's another aspect of a comparison that we really hadn't touched on, is shame.
Yeah.
Because that's what comes in those places, just what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Shame comes in and says, you're not good enough. And that, the end result of shame is suicidal ideation, It's I might as well just give up.
Yeah.
hopelessness.
Well, a big part too is even if you don't go all the way to that thought, that extreme.
I'm just saying if you carry it all the way.
Right. But where I've seen it is where in my own life at times, but I've seen it with a lot of guys, is where they get to this place where it's self-hatred.
Yeah.
Self-hatred. And that's so powerful of a force because we're called to love each other as we love ourselves, right? And if you hate yourself, what kind of love can you have for somebody else?
You can't.
It's impossible.
That's right.
I mean, you can treat people good and things like that. You can like people. But if you truly hate yourself and you've got this shame and you're beating yourself up, this self-flagellating, lifestyle and mentality, there's no way that you can really bring hope to somebody else or inspiration or, encouragement.
Yeah, that's why the enemy wants to keep you in isolation.
Yeah.
In Proverbs 18, it says, a man who isolates himself rages against his own soul.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's the truth.
And you know a little bit about
I know
isolation.
a little bit about that, yeah.
For those of you who don't know Ron's story, how many years were you in an isolation cell?
Solitary confinement for 13 years, yeah.
13 years in a 5x8 solitary confinement cell. So you know a little bit about isolation.
Definitely. It's, there's hopelessness there.
Yeah.
There's shame there. There's regret. Piles of regret there. Because all you have time to do is think, Yeah. And that's another thing I heard Dr. Peterson say one time that made a lot of sense. Self-reflection in that place is the same, technically the same as misery.
Wow.
Technically, because when you're digging that deep into regret and shame and failure, you're just miserable.
So let's talk about this a little bit, because self-reflection in of itself is good, right? We want people to take honest assessments of themselves, right? You always want to be looking and checking yourself.
Self-awareness. Yeah.
Self-awareness, but if that's coming from a point of contentment, right?
Yeah.
Then you're always, it's a healthy, looking at my life, right? And analyzing, looking and saying, hey, where, what's an honest assessment? Where am I right now? And what, how can I improve? If that's coming from a place of contentment, that's one thing. But if it's coming from that place of discontentment,
and self-hatred,
now you're digging deep into self-hatred.
You're looking for reasons to accuse yourself.
Right.
The enemy don't even have to do it anymore. You're doing it.
You're doing a great job all by yourself. And so what you're really doing, going back to your story, is you're putting yourself into solitary confinement.
That's right.
Because you're gonna put walls up to keep people away. Because if I'm rolling around in shame and disappointment and self-hatred, I don't want anybody to know me. I certainly don't want anybody to see me, right?
Mm-hmm. So, all that being said, what do you think is the solution or the process by which we come out of that, and what do we need to focus on? I mean, I know we need to focus on who God says we are and how He sees us, but there's got to be some self-talk involved, to bring you out of that, to say, when you start to slip into that mode, you can tell yourself, no, I'm not going there, because I believe you can speak word curses over yourself in that place.
Sure.
You can put things on yourself that don't need to be there just by your own tongue.
Yeah, well, you partner with, there's things that have been done and said.
Yeah, you're coming into agreement with it.
Yeah, that's because we talk about this a lot. Agreement is the most powerful force on earth.
It is.
Are we agreeing with truth? Are we agreeing with God? Or are we agreeing with our past and our failures and what
our own thinking, our own self-talk,
right? And so many people have, we all do. We have things in our past that have tainted us, that have painted us a certain color, and that we carry with us. And if we keep dwelling on those things, and if we keep agreeing with those things, agreement actually empowers. Right?
Yeah.
It actually empowers. This is one of the things, like, I love our relationship so much, and we're both so dedicated to having relationships with guys, is we really do need a tribe. We need men in our lives.
Definitely.
I know you and I call each other out on stuff all the time, and it's just like, hey, I'm struggling with this. And, you go, are you still?
Yeah.
You bring it up. You're
get over it.
That's right. Get over yourself. But there's that safety there. But it's coming from, I'm not comparing myself to you. You and I don't compare ourselves.
Right.
We're past that. We've overcome that. So instead, you and I have a very sufficient, secure relationship.
Yeah, I think that's the whole purpose of God. You know, he created us as relationship-based beings.
Yeah.
Because he's a relationship-based being, you know.
Right.
And we need other men to be able to come into our lives and see the real us.
Yeah.
And then be able to speak into our lives that, like Richard did for me this morning, Pastor Richard did for me this morning, you know, just be able to speak life and healing and what just the words that you need.
That's right.
That, you know, maybe you couldn't hear from anybody else. You know what I mean? You can't hear that from your wife because she doesn't know how to speak into you like these other men that really know who you are.
That's right. And you should, and hopefully people have great communication.
It's not her role even to do it.
You want to have great communication with your spouse, right?
Yeah.
And you have to have brave communication. You have to have honest communication. But a man can speak into a man because he comes from a unique perspective.
That's right.
Right. And I say this all the time, though. Men need to understand that their pain and their brokenness and their struggles and everything they've wrestled with, you know, regret and shame, that doesn't disqualify them.
Never.
It uniquely qualifies them. Because I know out of my life and my brokenness, I'm able to speak into guys' lives, and I can give them hope, you know. I can give them hope. They say, wow, you've been through that?
Yeah.
And you're here? Not
That's
like
right.
I'm somewhere.
I see it all the times when I go back into prisons, speak to men in prisons, and I can speak their language. I can relate to exactly where they're at because I've been sitting there in that same uniform in that same chapel. Yeah. I can relate to where they're at, sitting back there in a solitary confinement cell, and that's a powerful thing, man. You know, because I think most of the time, especially young men, they don't really want to hear what you got to say. Even if you're older, wiser, you know, they think they got it all figured out. But if you can relate to them, if you've been where they're at, it opens them up to receiving something from you that wouldn't normally happen.
Yeah. But that comes from a man. This is part of what our whole message for Next Third Best Third is, that intentionality. You have to make a decision that I'm going to look and try to invest myself in these men's lives.
Oh, yeah.
You have to make a decision to do that.
Yeah, because if you don't, then you won't do it.
No, you won't do it. And they're not going to come and knock on your door.
No.
See, I've got a friend a bit older than me, and he's like going, it doesn't seem like any young guys, you know, want any advice or anything. I says, do you go to him? You know?
Do you even talk to him?
Do you talk to him? And he's going, no. And I'm like, they're not going to come up to you.
No.
You've got to be intentional, right?
That's right.
Because we bring an inspiration, we bring a transparency, we bring a vulnerability by going to them. And it's not like you're going to them to tell them how to do things right. Mm-hmm. You know, you're going to them and you're just being honest, you know? Yeah.
Well, that's another area. You got to take the comparison out of it.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to go up to them thumping your chest and saying, I got everything figured out.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And I think that's the biggest problem we've always had in the church is, you know, pastors won't get vulnerable. Elders in the church don't get vulnerable out of fear.
Right.
Of being seen a certain way or whatever.
Well,
and young people see that and they just think it's fake.
You know, we say it in
because
the church.
It is.
It is fake. You know, you see it in the church, but I mean, in the corporate world.
And now you see it there too.
You get the people higher up in the corporate world, they don't want to be vulnerable and real because it might cost them their job. It might cost them a promotion.
Yeah.
Someone might look at them and deem them not what they, you know, not valuable to the company anymore, or maybe a weak link.
Right.
And so that's why you have to choose who you have these relationships with, right? You just
but you have to have them.
But you have to have them. You have to have them. And
with somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you and I have belonged to a group called Dragon Slayers, right? And that was started by Danny Silk, and I love it because the intentionality of who we have chosen to walk with in this. And we have 12 men here locally who are part of what we call our Dragon Slayers group. But the thing that Danny put out that I loved when we were on that retreat in Wyoming, I still remember when he gave those two main criterias. Mm-hmm. When you select a man, You want a man who you want in your life for the rest of your life.
Right.
That is so heavy. That's
Yeah.
so weighty.
And it's uncommon.
It's uncommon. So you select a man that you want in your life for the rest of your life. And the second criteria is it's a man you want the whole world to know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's so cool that we found 12.
And the third is somebody you enjoy being around.
Yeah, that's right. You have to enjoy being around them too. And the beautiful thing I love about our group is we've got guys from age 32 to age 65.
Right.
You know, they're all across the spectrum. They're all at a different place in their lives. Some don't have kids. Some have a slew of kids.
Right.
Some are dealing with grandkids, you know. We've got divorce. We've got, you know, unmarried. We've got, you know, it's just amazing that the guys have committed to walk with each other with intentionality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And vulnerability. And that's a powerful thing.
Yep.
And we don't compare.
Right.
So, well, this is good, right?
It's amazing.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap it up now. We're going to get back together. Ron and I are going to be doing this for forever because we're going to be in each other's lives for the rest of our lives.
That's
right. We really appreciate you joining us today. We'd love if you would subscribe, share this with some other people in your life, and comment if you'd like. We'd like to hear from you. So thanks again for joining us.